people say, oh, IT से क्या होगा? 8% of our GDP today comes from IT and IT-based industry. Technology, telecom हम नहीं use कर रहे हैं, सिर्फ IT and IT-enabled services, IT and BPO largely, for want of a better, this 8 to 9% of our GDP comes from this industry, right? Agriculture हम लोग सबको बताया गया, हम लोग कृषि प्रधान देश से हैं, we are an agriculture-centric nation. You know how much agriculture accounts for? 14, 15, 16%, around that level. So more than half of agriculture comes through one industry which did not exist 40, 50 years ago at all. Good news is 1/3, or close to, some people say even half of the IT outsourcing work happens out of India, which is a very, very huge share that we have today. Sorry, 1/3 of BPO work happens out of India, all over the world, and half of software services works happens out of India, right, kind of thing. And almost, as I said earlier, almost 60 lakh people are directly employed in this industry. It's a huge, huge, huge. Some terminology change I would like you to understand very clearly. See, a lot of people think that terms, they use terms like machine, machine language and artificial intelligence, they use interchangeably, right? There's some overlap, but they are not the same, right? So I think they are closely related. I think when you discuss big data, predictive analysis, but they are very different in scope and application if you look at, right? I mean, so AI, what it does, it actually mimics, it copies, it mimics the cognitive human functions. What are the human functions? Of thinking, of seeing, understanding, spoken and written language, right? Analyze data and make recommendations, right? So all that, the human functions are mimicked by AI. And how does AI mimic? Using the past human decisions taken by people like us, right? All of you, right? It uses what decisions were taken and uses that knowledge to predict decisions, human decisions, which are going to be taken. That's what AI does. What does machine learning do? It is, in a way, I think machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. So it enables machines and systems to learn and improve with their own experience, right? So I think it is in a way, it is a part of that. Now, another confusion which is very, very rampant in this digital transformation space is, a lot of people think data science and artificial intelligence are the same, right? So they are not the same. So data science, essentially, it has statistical and mathematical tools, methods, technologies to derive meaningful, derive something of meaning from data. That science is called data science, right? Use statistics, use mathematical models, use large data which is available to derive meaningful outcome results. That is essentially what data science is. Whereas AI takes data science a bit forward. What it does, it uses data to solve complex cognitive problems which were earlier associated, or which are actually associated with humans. What kind of problems? Intelligence, learning, pattern recognition, human speech, human expression, right? So I will go to an extent of, as I said earlier, when I was trying to give you the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning in a way is a subset of artificial intelligence, because it enables, machine learning enables machines or systems to learn, and improve from their past performance and from their experience, right? Whereas the difference, now extending that to data science and AI, I think data science sits on the top of, artificial intelligence sits on the top of data science, right? If there was no data science, AI may not have become the reality, right? So data science uses statistics, mathematical modeling to make meaningful inferences out of data, whereas AI sits on the top of data science and mimics functions which you normally associate with human beings, like intelligence, like handwriting, like pattern recognition, like human expression, speech, and so on and so forth, right? So this is essentially the difference, which is very, very important, right? See, India's work so far on the Industry 4.0 technologies has not been very good. On AI also it is not very good. But if you look at, it's a country of paradoxes. You look at the top 20 technology companies in the Silicon Valley in the US, right? 12 of them have people of Indian origin, they're the CEO. And they, except one, all of them were born in India and had their first degree from our education system. Manipal or IITs and so on and so forth, that they had the first degree. And then they went abroad for their masters or PhDs or whatever, and the rest is history. 12 CEOs of top 20 technology companies in Silicon Valley, they are of Indian origins. And except one or two, most of them studied in Indian system, and they are a product of an Indian system. Sundar Pichai, Google, Alphabet, and Alphabet. Alphabet is the holding company of Google. Satya Nadella, Microsoft. Sanjay Mehrotra of Micron. Shantanu Narayan of Adobe. Arvind Krishna of IBM, Neil Mohan of YouTube, George Kurian of NetApp, Parag Agrawal of CEO. I mean, recently the WhatsApp global CEO is also this guy, Shah from India, this fintech company which has been, the company has not been acquired, but a strategic stake has been, bought by, I think 10% stake has been bought by Meta, the company that runs WhatsApp as well as Facebook, So I think these are the kind of changes which are happening. So what AI essentially, let's talk about a few areas where AI does a huge amount of transformation in the way businesses are done. Disease diagnosis, right? Still hospitals are not using it to an extent, but diagnosis of problems can become much easier. How would you leverage AI? Because similar but why it is not happening so far? Because much of that diagnosis data of earlier patients, the past patients, is not in digital form, right? If you convert that into digital form, then with these kind of symptoms, this kind of age group, this kind of a demographic profile, what was the most probable diagnosis which happened in those patients, right? In those cases, right? So in complex disease diagnosis, AI can do wonders, right? Drug development. Some of the protein structures which go into the drugs, where the development of those protein structures used to take 10 to 20 years, it can happen in a couple of months. Because the entire process has become so fast because of deployment of AI, right? Client service, right? Support. How many of you have picked up phones or done something with on internet for a customer service which is provided to you, where you have a voice comes, but it's not a human voice. It's a system generated voice. Have you experienced? How many? Just raise your hands. How many of you have experienced, right? So what it happens essentially, they are virtual assistants. They're not human people. Virtual people who mimic human voice, and even writing that you get is not, somebody is not hidden there. System generated writing, right? And everything. And chat boxes. Can you, now this is such a development which will shatter our BPO business big time. Because today almost half the work which BPO operators do can be done by AI assistants and chat boxes. आप ये कह सकते हो कि वो सर्विस आपको नहीं मिलती है because there are standard, but AI is also maturing, right? AI is not a static technology. It is maturing. As you feed more and more data, past data, the decision making in AI, be it in drug diagnosis, disease diagnosis, or these kind of things will keep on improving, right? Development of AI chips. Today there are chips which are largely designed for artificial intelligence, right? Edge computing has become a reality, right? The AI and blockchain technologies have, there's a huge amount of integration of Internet of Things, blockchain with AI. So these are the developments which are big time. See what is helping? Why AI is like a sword hanging on our heads, right? And much of the digital transformation, today happens leveraging AI, right? So one is that why is AI going and moving ahead with leaps and bounds? One reason is, big reason is the availability of big data. That's very, very important. Because AI sits and takes its decisions based on the data, right? And the data is getting more and more and more and more. It is, it's available data today, right? So the big data availability is a huge, huge reason. Advancements in the AI algorithms, I think that's very important. Advancement in the computing power, cloud infrastructure, it is improved. I mean, it is, today, what? Now why is cloud important? One is that you don't have to bother about your own data, big servers and data centers and so on and so forth. You can hire space on somebody else and do that. So one thing is very, very clear that, sorry, I lost the thread of what I was saying. These phones can be very, very misleading. So, what was I saying? Will somebody remind me? Huh? So cloud, you don't need to hire servers. But what happens, if you set up a dedicated data center for your own company's operations, right? The utilization rate used to be as low as 8%, 9%, 10%, right? And if you have a common data center on a cloud meaning not in the air, cloud is also physical data center somewhere on the earth, right? Kind of thing. The connectivity is through the cloud, through internet, right? You need to have a connectivity through the cloud. That's the reason it's said cloud. No, it's not a real data center, right? It's just that it's a shared data center. And because of the sharing of the space, the data center that have not physical space, I'm talking about the machine space, right? You are able to optimize on the cost. So if you have a dedicated data center to you, it's called the cost is going to be far more exorbitant than doing it on the cloud, right? And then you set up a data center, already have a disaster recovery center. Because what if there's a bomb on the city? Bombay में data center आपका उसमें अगर किसी ने bomb फेंक दिया तो क्या होगा? All operations will come to a grinding halt. So you have to have somewhere in some different countries. There are a lot of examples where the DR site, the disaster recovery sites of big data centers is in a different thing. And real-time replication of data keeps happening there, right? Or with a gap of a few seconds, a few minutes here and there, the replication will keep happening. So I think this is another reason why it's happening big time. Growing demand for automation, optimization. Because Western countries, we don't realize in our country, but in Western countries and more developed countries, manpower is a very, very expensive resource, right? And there's stipulations, you can't pay your workers beyond a certain level. There's stipulations here also, but those are at a very, very low level. Those minimum wages that we prescribe are ridiculously low. You can't even survive in those minimum wages, what our governments mandate. I mean, for an average industrial worker, the salaries in Japan's and Germany's and UK's and US's of the world are huge. Even China, salaries are increasing big time, right? So I think even populous countries can't hold back thinking that they have a huge population and they can sit back and avoid deployment of technology. The big demand on automation, increased use of AI in customer-facing applications like virtual assistants, like chatbots, which I just described. Growing investment in partnerships among technology companies, research institutions, and governments. So I think these are big development, right? There are some risks also. Let me tell you, nothing comes without risks. There are huge amount of risks. For sustainability of AI, risks and concerns are the misuse of to create harmful content. Right? A lot of harmful content, deep fakes. You heard of this concept called deep fakes, right? Today a reel can be made showing you indulging in a crime which you never indulged, and today you're somehow able to figure out whether it's real or deep. But as AI will evolve, 2 years down the line, you'll not be able to tell whether it's a real thing or it's a deep fake, because the deep fake will become almost as good as real. Even today, some of the old videos which are AI created, when you see, you doubt whether it's actually happening or not happening, right? So this is a huge. Deep fakes lead to impersonation. How many people have lost their wealth because everything was there in electronic form, and somebody infiltrated into your system or asked for a wrong password, a wrong OTP, and you're gone, right? Be very, very careful. Leading to fraud, impersonation, data breaches, intellectual property risks. Those are, AI models trained on vast data sets can expose proprietary information. Today, if a data has been, what makes you feel that Samsung's data set, the data of Samsung customers, at no cost would like to sell it to Apple at all, right? Because then Apple will try to reach out to those customers and convert them into Apple customers, right? Kind of a thing. So now with so much of interweaving of technologies and data and everything on cloud, there could also be organizations which trade competitors' data at a heavy price, right? It's possible. All kinds of things are possible, right? So I think data privacy ownership issues are very, very, very important. Bias and discrimination. AI can inherit societal biases potentially leading to unequal